everyone, and thanks for joining me here on Mom Squad. I'm Maureen Kyle, and this is a show about all the parenting issues that we encounter. In last week's episode, we talked about how kids seem to be growing up way too fast. They're exhibiting very mature behaviors at younger and younger ages. And at the end of the episode, child psychologist Dr. Kim Bell and I started talking about disrespectful behaviors. Did you know there is a deeper meaning behind that eye roll or the back talk from your child? We went in depth about how to decode what your child is really trying to tell you and how to handle it. Disrespectful behavior might be one of the top questions that we get into Mom Squad, because and I know we've talked a little bit about this before, but it really expands to all sorts of ages. And we know that there's disrespectful behavior and then how we react to it. So I really want to focus in on that because you can get a 2-year-olds, I don't know if they really realize what's happening, but I always felt like, oh my gosh, if I don't correct this now at age 2, I'm going to have a disrespectful teen, whatever. And then teens, we know they all change and develop. Are there phases and ages to disrespectful behavior?
That is a fantastic question. The answer is yes. So the answer is, oh goodness, okay. There's so much we can do with the question you just asked. So first of all, in our previous conversation about this, I was thinking about eye rolling, because I think it's one of the ones that can just send parents, like, you're in an argument with your kid and you're frustrated and angry and they're, reacting the way they're reacting, and then you get the ugh. And
it happens at early ages too.
Yes.
I mean, I've had like a 1-year-old eye roll me.
So I actually went and looked this up because I wanted to be sure that I was right, and I was right. Eye rolling is not instinctive. It is not a reflex. We are not born to do it. It is a learned behavior. So if your kid is eye rolling, it's because they've seen it.
From us. Okay.
And here's what, so that's the piece of it I just wanted, like, are we inborn? I don't think so. Let me look it up. So I was looking it up. But let's talk about what those kinds of behaviors communicate. Like, when we talk about disrespect, there's verbal disrespect. You're stupid, you're whatever. But then there's the, that kind of tone and the eye rolling and all of those types of things. Truth be told, don't take those too seriously, because here's what they are. It is actually an attempt to not act out or say what you're thinking. Think about a business meeting that you've been in. Think about any kind of social situation where you saw something. You didn't just go, oh my God, what you did was ridiculous. You kind of just go, and it sort of keeps it in. Now, girls tend to be more internalizing, boys tend to be more externalizing. So young girls tend to roll their eyes more than boys. And so we consider it like the teenage girl passive aggressiveness, but girls tend to externalize. Boys are more likely to kick a wall or, sort of do that kind of a acting out, whereas girls tend to be much more internal. And so they tend to roll their eyes more at you, at each other, at their teachers. They tend to kind of pull in. And so it is actually, we're going to reframe how we look at it. It is actually an attempt to not say what's on their mind. And so it's like this quiet sort of thing. The reason why it feels so aggressive or disrespectful is because it never happens in a moment where you're calm. It only happens when you're like, turn the television off, it's time to go, or turn your computer off, it's time to go. And you're like, told them 3 times, and you're frustrated, they're frustrated, and they're like, fine, and then you're like, oh, that's not the response I wanted.
Right.
So it's interpreted in context. And if we can remove the context and understand what it is their way of complying with an expression of frustration. Now, if they're rolling their eyes and they're walking away and they're not complying, then you deal with the compliance issue, right? Okay. Then you deal with the issue of what it is they're not doing that you want them to do. But the act itself is not disrespectful. We label it that way.
Okay.
And watch yourself, because if you've got an eye roller, it's very likely someone in your family, also an eye roller, right? Also has a difficult time not showing their emotions on their face.
So I guess, and that was a great point, and I'm going back over my mind, like when I've experienced the eye roll and the compliance, that's how we should be categorizing it. So when they do comply, we should just take a deep breath and go, okay, that was it. But when they don't comply and the frustrations are high and the anger is high, I know our next step is crucial. So let's say you get the eye roll and the walk away not complying. What's the best way to react to that?
The first thing is you need to make sure that you are in a calm place and centered, right? So take a minute because you're going to be triggered. And that's not the best, like you're going to escalate versus de-escalate the situation. And I don't know, as an example, you might say, look, you can roll your eyes and walk away from me, and I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to calm down, and I'm going to calm down, and then we're going to get this done. Like with the expectation, like it is okay even for kids to take a break when you're struggling with something, right? You asked me, does it show at different ages in different ways? And it does. It is great that you want to work with your 2-year-old because 2-year-olds are just experiencing aggression, like they're just getting into it. They have no internal controls for that. They're all impulse. So those like angry outbursts and defiance in the 2-year-old are teachable moments. They're not moments of disrespect. They're not old enough for that. They're teachable moments for impulsive behavior that's not acceptable, and you begin to teach them this is how we behave as human beings. This is how we behave as human beings in our house. That's great. But come 3, they're going to go off to preschool, and they're going to learn all kinds of new and interesting things from people who are not you. And then you have to then have teachable moments about other people behave this way, but this is what I expect of you when you're at school, and they can have a trouble and it doesn't have to be yours, and then you have to re-educate at that age. Then you hit elementary school, and there's a different level of separation. Like every time they separate from you just a little bit more on their path to becoming their own full self, separate from you, with their own ideas, their own beliefs, their own thoughts. That's the age at which you have kids coming home and you've got somebody in the house, let's say, that's a smoker. The kids are coming home and the teacher said, and they have this new information they want to share, and that can feel disrespectful. And they, in their minds, when they learn something new, and this is true of teenagers as well, when they learn something new, they don't think, oh, I'm just learning this, but everybody else in the world knows it. Their first experience of learning or knowing something makes them feel so special that the reason they come home and tell you about it is because they're not sure you know, right?
Yeah.
And so then when they become teenagers and they're really emotionally separating from you and genuinely contemplating what does life look like independent without my parents, then they need to be different from you in many ways. And so there is a tendency to think, well, you don't really understand global politics. You don't really understand, because they need to separate. And at each of those points of separation, there's a vulnerability. There's the visual that I always think of in my own head is like when you're swimming and you're in a pool and you push off from the side and you're kind of floating there for a minute, all is well and good until you feel like you need to get your feet on solid ground. That's what separation feels like to me. That's sort of what I see in my head when I think about it. And so when you want to get on solid ground, especially as a teenager, you can't just reach back out for your parents. The toddler runs and then stops and turns back. The 3-year-old goes off to preschool, but is exhausted and needy at the end of the day because they've missed you and they're having a hard time keeping you in mind. They may be angry with you when you pick them up from school, and demanding. And that demandingness is not really disrespect, it's a need. That they're expressing of, I've been away from you for too long. And some of our kids, because we work, have to be away from us starting at a very young age for 8-9 hours a day. That's a long time. And so it's not unusual for evenings to be full of angst and frustration. And it can feel like disrespect, but it really isn't. It's not really disrespect until about age 9.
Yeah.
And then it really is.
Then it is.
Then it really is
Yeah.
disrespect. And so I think understanding where your child is, and no matter, again, let's talk about putting on the costume of independence. You can think, oh, well, my kid's fine, they don't need me. But the thing they need most, Anna Freud said it. She said, mothers are there to be left.
I know. That's very sad.
Yeah. It's that your job is to stand in place so that your children can leave.
Yeah.
Because the reason they can leave is because they always know they have a place to come back to. And so at different ages, they just take a few more steps away from you before they turn around and come back. And some of that pushing away looks like disrespect.
Is that, you kind of brought up like, the sort of anger or the stress that leads into, some of the disrespectful behavior. And I picture back talk more than anything when you talk about that. So, and I don't know anybody who hasn't experienced kids with that back talk. And it varies from toddlers through teenagers, but it always elicits the response of, don't you talk to me like that. It's like I've said it before. I'm hearing my mom's voice come through me.
Oh, I've said it.
Yes.
Heck yeah.
So what is the appropriate response on our end? Because as you said, we have to be from a calm place, but that's in that moment. I've also heard you can't go back. Like you have to correct a child in that moment so they know what they're doing wrong. I mean, depending on the age.
Yeah. I think depending on the age, I would disagree. Not everybody agrees, right? There's different ways of parenting. I don't agree that you can't go back.
Okay.
I actually think like post-game debriefs are a great idea because when everybody's calm, then you can talk about it. And sometimes if you've had a big blow up like that, there's a lot of sorries to go around. Sorry on their part, sorry on your part, because and that's imperfect parenting. That's the class I want to teach, like how to be a completely imperfect parent. That's my goal.
There's a few of us out here.
Well, because there is no, I can talk and I can say this is what I recommend, but that doesn't mean that in those moments where everybody's emotions are high and you're getting that kind of back talk, you're feeling the frustration, you can do the best you can do to realize that while you're frustrated is not the best time to sort of have this conversation. But there are times when your toddler is going to be in the car without their winter coat or barefoot. And you may feel like you're the worst parent in the world at that moment, but sometimes you have to get in the car. And those are okay moments. If they're happening every day, then talk to somebody, get some help with your child. I don't ever want parents to believe that there is one parenting system that works for everybody, because then you end up feeling like, well, if this didn't work for me, but it worked for my neighbor, then that means I'm a terrible parent because I can't make it work.
Yeah.
Every child needs something slightly different. And so you're going to miss each other. You and the child are going to miss each other on occasion. And you're going to respond to back talk with, don't talk to me like that. That's okay. Like, don't talk to me that way. And oftentimes, I will say this with kids, if you want them to change their behavior, you have to follow up what you don't want them to do with what you do want them to do, right? Don't talk to me that way. I am your mother. I understand that you're angry, but if you're angry, say, I'm angry. You're not allowed to talk to me that way. And if there are consequences, then there are consequences,
So I have 3 kids, and you brought up, even parenting style. My parenting style might not be like my neighbor's, or what my neighbor's trying might not work for me. But I also have 3 different personalities where I feel like I also have one, like I definitely have an eye rolling kid. I definitely have the back talk kid. And then I also have the kid who seems totally unaffected by me going, what are you doing? Why are you talking to me that way? And she just kind of gives me the, okay, mom, and like thumbs up, and then like doesn't talk, and so I get a little bit of that cold shoulder. How do we handle the cold shoulder kids? And then also, how do you handle, like I don't want to treat one a certain way, and then have the other one think like, well, that one never gets yelled at. Of course the baby never gets yelled at. You know, like you build up that sibling rivalry.
Yeah. Well, again, I'm a firm believer in the fact that you can never treat two people exactly the same way. And I think it's true. Everybody wants to be fair, right? But it's okay to talk to kids and say, well, because she doesn't need that. You know, if you have one kid who doesn't get sent to their room because they're an introvert and getting sent to their room is reinforcement, right? Like, go to your room, thank you, and they're happy, then that's not going to work for that one. But if you have a more extroverted child and you're like, go to your room, and that separation is like painful, then that is going to elicit a different response. And so I think more importantly, if parents really want to understand their kids, and we could talk for an hour, just about understanding what temperament is, that your children are born with certain tendencies in their intellectual life, in their emotional life. And what you're doing as a parent is like, have you ever taken your kids bowling and you put down the like gutter guards?
Yes.
You know what I'm talking about? Like, that's what you're doing. Like, again, I'm very visual, so that's the parenting visual there too, is like you're putting down those bumper guards. You don't want them falling off into the gutter, right? But they're gonna bounce around quite a bit. So that's what you're trying to do, is sort of take this child who is born with all these potentialities and maximize those potentials. And when you think about it that way, there's no way you can treat each child exactly the same. They're going to be reinforced by different things. They're going to see consequences differently. They're going to have different aptitudes. They're going to have different levels of a capacity for emotional control at different ages. Some kids are much more emotionally expressive, and other kids are much more internal, and you have to pull it out of them. And the job of the parent, which is interesting because the parent is coming at parenting with their own temperament, and your temperament may or may not match that of your child. It's genetics, right? There's genetics involved in there. So one child might be like you, one child might be like the other parent, and sometimes your personalities will clash with one of your children, and you'll feel like you don't understand that one at all, and then one child will mesh with you, and it's all about parents being able to be flexible enough to be the ones who adjust. To try and help their child. So the ones who are eye rollers are much more internalized. They're trying not to say what they think. The ones who back talk are much more external, and they don't have the impulse control to like handle that. And back talk, by the way, is like trying to be an adult. They're actually, in their heads, they're talking to you the way they hear you talking to them. And they're trying to mimic that back at you. They're trying to get on equal footing. And that's never gonna work. But they're gonna try, it's in their nature.
It's funny because my daughter the other day, I asked her a question, she goes, why are you mad at me? And I was like, do I sound mad? I didn't know that I sounded mad. But that's fascinating. It's an interesting way of looking at all of it.
Because it reflects how self-critical they're being of themselves. When they're critical of you, it's an externalization of how critical they are on the inside.
Gosh.
This
is like, that's a whole other
That's
Mom
a whole
Squad.
other thing.
That's all right. Well, we're going to have you back, Kim. Thank you so much. This is so insightful. Thank you. It's always a pleasure to have Dr. Kim Bell with the Hanna Perkins Center on the show. We hope that this helps you navigate some of your child's own behaviors. Thanks to all of you for joining me today. We're going to see you right back here next time on Mom Squad.